get a lot of questions about the router planes. Primarily, why would somebody use one of these over their electric router? And the reality is this is not taking the place of an electric router. Electric routers are typically used for shaping, for creating moldings and doing shaping that you would have done with a wooden molding plane. The router plane itself is more about depth of cut, creating flat reference surfaces, trimming something like a tenon, letting in a dado so that you have a consistent flat bottom to something, creating a groove that you're going to put a piece of stringing into or inlay, patching in a Dutchman, or creating a mortise hole to put in some inlay. Those are the kind of things that this plane is intended for. You've got the control over the depth of cut. You've got a fence for working in from an edge. You can do controlled points. And then you lock it in place with the screw on the side. So for something like trimming this tenon, what I'm concerned about is getting the piece centered so that when it goes to mate into the mortise, I'm going to get the even shoulder line. I'll remove the fence off the side because I'm not concerned about how far in from an edge I'm working. I want to set this to the final depth that it's going to be. I've got a depth stop on there so that I can get to that point and come work down to it in small bites. When I've determined how far in I want, I tighten down this depth stop. Then I'll back off, so I'm not taking it all in one pass. Tighten down the stop. And I've got this piece the same thickness as the other, so I can reference off of it. I'm not going to tip down as I work across here. I'll use a slicing cut across the piece. Come down a little bit in depth. By pinning this side down, I've got a pivot point. I can work across my piece. And I just keep creeping down until I get that final depth. I've bottomed out. I don't want to get things blown out on the back side there, so I'll actually spin that around and come off the other side. When I flip that over, because I have a set depth down, my tenon will be perfectly centered on the stock. Again, I don't want to go right straight into that final depth, so I'll back it off a little bit. That's going to be a little more aggressive there, so I'm going to do my reversal. Bottomed out at the final depth. And that'll just slip fit in. If I need to take a little bit more, I can come down just a touch more on both sides and I'll get a perfect fit every time. If I want to let in for this dado, I cut the vertical sides with a saw. So again, here, I want to find the final depth. Set the depth stop for that point, and then come up so that I'm not taking everything in one bite. Run through there. Don't want it to blow out off the back side, so I'll come through from the other. Come down a little bit. I'm taking pretty aggressive cuts right now because I'm trying to waste out a fair amount of material. When I get close to the bottom, I'm not going to go quite as aggressively. And I never go all the way through to the end because that's when you're going to increase your chances of tear out. Almost to the bottom. Now I'll go for that final little depth. Just down a touch, and I'm just smoothing off the bottom of the cut. And that's ready to take a shelf or whatever else might be going in there. If I want to do this long cut, that would be to put in a piece of banding. The square blades that we make for these are going to leave a little bit of a rough sided edge in that long grain cut. So I'm going to work off the edge with this pointed blade. The pointed blade is going to give a tapered cut out to the edges and sidewalls. I've established the sidewalls of this banding point with a marking gauge, so I've got a nice crisp shoulder line. To use that smaller blade, we made an adapter that will fit into this tool. If you want or need the fence attachment, it's going to go onto this plane. You can use all the small blades with the number 271, which is just a smaller version. It doesn't have as many controls and stop points. That smaller blade slips right into the adapter. Slide it all the way up. Then you can put your depth stop on there and rethread your depth adjuster nut. Now here again, you want to define the final depth with the depth stop. I'm going to be putting this piece of inlay in, so I don't want to go any deeper than that. Tighten down on that piece. And I'll back off the depth just a bit. I need to put my fence back on. Get that centered off my workpiece. And now as I work down, I'll start short at one end and come down to the other. And with that pointed tip, the cut feathers out to the two side walls. I didn't start at one end and come all the way through because I increase the chance of tear out if I do. I'm through all to one depth. I'll drop down to that final depth point. And I'm locking it hard in place with a screwdriver so that the blade doesn't shift on me. Establish that cut, the depth all the way through the piece, through the groove. Make sure the corners are clean. And I can set in my strip of banding. So for defined depth cuts, you're going to have a hard time finding a better tool to do that job.